I stood by the edge of the infinity pool, gripping the champagne flute tighter than I should have. The music blasted from rented speakers, the kind that scream wealth more than taste, and the fake smiles from half the family stung more than the California sun ever could. "You're not gonna say anything? After everything your brother's done for you?" My mother hissed in my ear, her teeth clenched, so tight her jaw trembled. I looked at her. Calmly. I said no. "I'm not selling my stock. It's mine." The chatter around us hadn't slowed, but my refusal rippled like a dropped wine glass. My father caught the tail end of it and spun on his heel, the same way he used to when I was a kid, and said I didn't want to practice piano anymore. "You'd let your brother go to Greece without the honeymoon he deserves?" His voice cut through the air like a blade. "I'd let him pay for it himself like a grown man," I said, not raising my voice, not blinking. That's when it happened. A hand, I couldn't tell if it was my mother's or my aunt's, shoved hard against my shoulder. My heel slipped on the wet tile, and then I was underwater. The sound died instantly. Just the roaring silence of chlorine and shock. The sting of betrayal in my lungs before the water even reached them. I surfaced to laughter. Not the kind that says, "Oops," or "We went too far." It was mean. Cold. Triumphant. "Maybe now she'll cool off," someone snorted. I blinked the water out of my eyes and pushed my soaked hair back, chest heaving. I climbed out slowly, my dress clinging to my body like wet paper. A staff member tried handing me a towel, but I waved him off. That was the moment. That exact second, barefoot, dripping, humiliated when I made the decision. I wasn't going to be their doormat anymore. I turned toward the crowd. They were still smirking, half drunk on celebration and entitlement. My brother looked annoyed. Not worried. Not apologetic. Just irritated that I was ruining the vibe of his luxury wedding. "You all really think I'm selfish?" I asked, voice low but sharp. Silence. "You think I'm ungrateful?" My father scoffed. "You are. You wouldn't even help your family for once in your damn life." I stared at him. My heart raced, but my voice stayed calm. "Funny thing, Dad. I've helped you more than you ever knew." He rolled his eyes. "Oh, don't get dramatic." I took a slow step forward, water trailing behind me like a warning. "That $300,000 portfolio, you wanted me to cash out? It's worth double that now. I didn't touch it for 10 years. You know why?" Nobody answered. "Because I knew one day you'd come asking. I knew one day you'd call me selfish for not handing over my future for your convenience." My mother stepped forward, voice sharp. "You've always acted like you're better than us." "No." I cut in sharper. "I just refuse to shrink for you." I turned to the staff member who offered me the towel. "Can I borrow your phone?" He nodded and handed it over without question. I dialed. 1 ring. 2. Then, "It's time," I said. "Do it." I handed the phone back and smiled. Their faces shifted instantly. That look when people realized the storm they started was headed straight for their own roof. "What did you do?" my brother asked, his new wife gripping his arm like the champagne tower was about to collapse. I glanced at my father. "Remember your retirement fund?" His jaw locked. "You're going to want to sit down." They didn't sit. Not yet. They just stared. Confused. Nervous. But not scared. Not until the first phone rang. It was Uncle Gary, one of the leeches always circling my father like flies around rotting power. His laughter stopped mid-sip. He pulled the phone from his ear slowly, looked directly at my dad, and said in a low voice, "You'd better check your portfolio." My dad's face twisted. He fished his phone from his blazer pocket, fingers shaking slightly, and he never shook. Not even when he yelled at me as a teen for talking back, when I asked for a life of my own. He tapped through the app, then froze. What the hell?" I could almost hear the blood drain from his face. "What did you do?" he muttered, almost himself, almost like I wasn't standing there soaking wet in front of 200 guests and a string quartet that had just awkwardly stopped playing. I shrugged. "You remember the trust Grandpa left me? The one you all pretended didn't exist." My brother's new bride, still in her lacy gown, gasped. "Wait, what trust?" My mother's hand went to her mouth. Oh, I continued, stepping forward, dripping onto the concrete with every word. You did a good job burying it. Hired lawyers to make sure I didn't know. Told everyone I was just the emotional one, the ungrateful daughter who never gave back. But what you didn't know. I reached into the handbag I'd left on the dry poolside chair earlier, bless waterproof phone cases, and pulled out a single, folded document. Is that Grandpa left me his shares. Not just a small piece. All of them. In his private firm. The silence thickened. I own 62%, I said. Effective as of 11 a.m. this morning. My father's face dropped like I had just smacked him. You're lying, my brother said flatly, his voice cracking on the last syllable. I handed the document to the nearest person. Ironically, the same cousin who once told me I'd never amount to anything more than assistant manager at some thrift store. He scanned it, blinked, and looked up at me like he didn't recognize who I was. It's real, he whispered. And that was when the guests started murmuring. Some clutched their phones, checking the headlines, the company website, the inevitable SEC filing I had made public 15 minutes earlier. It was all there.
New CEO, me.
Old board? Disbanded. My father's name? Removed. My brother's startup fund? Revoked. Collateral pulled. His next big app? Dead on arrival. He stared at me in disbelief. You're ruining everything. No, I said slowly, calmly. I'm reclaiming everything. My mother's hands trembled. We raised you. No, I interrupted coldly. You used me. And for the first time in years, I didn't flinch. I didn't explain. I didn't try to earn love that was never real. I stood taller, even as my wet dress clung to my legs and my hair stuck to my cheek. You called me selfish for protecting the one thing Grandpa left me. But you threw me in a pool over a honeymoon you couldn't afford without draining my future. You humiliated me in front of strangers. You laughed when I surfaced. The photographer, yes, the professional hired to capture their perfect day, raised his camera again, silently documenting the most expensive mistake they'd ever made. My brother was pacing now, pulling at his tie. You can't just do this. I already did. That's when security arrived. 3 suited men in black.
Calm.
Professional. One leaned in and whispered to my father. His face went pale. You're removing me from the premises? He asked, stunned. The guard nodded once. Ma'am's request. She now owns the venue. My brother exploded. This was my wedding. I finally smiled. No, it was your audition. And you failed. The chaos unraveled fast. My brother shouted something incoherent, knocking over a floral centerpiece as he lunged toward the guards. The new bride shrieked as her white stiletto snapped on the tile. Poetic, really, and clung to him like their shared delusion would keep them afloat. But no one stepped in to help. Not Aunt Cheryl, who used to compare me to her dog. Not my cousin Jade, who once borrowed 10 grand and ghosted me. Not even the officiant, who stood awkwardly holding a soaked Bible and muttering something about needing to step away from this energy. The guards didn't lay a hand on my brother. They didn't have to. His tantrum did the job for them. As they guided him toward the gates, I turned to my father. His eyes were locked on me like I was some stranger who'd just stolen his legacy. You planned this, he said, voice gravelly, full of accusation and fear. Yes, I said, stepping closer. And I waited. 11 years. While you told people I was unstable. While you guilt-tripped me for not sacrificing everything I worked for. While you let everyone believe I was the disgrace. I waited. His mouth opened.
Closed.
No words came. Grandpa trusted me because I didn't need the spotlight. I didn't need to be seen to be powerful. I watched while you turned this family into a fraud. Image over integrity. Appearances over love. But now, I reached into my bag again, pulled out a second envelope. This time it was addressed to him. Your severance. He snatched it, tore it open, scanned the single page, and his hands trembled. You're firing me? You fired yourself the day you forged Grandpa's signature. His face went blank. How did you? I didn't, I said softly. But he did. I pointed behind him. Everyone turned. Walking down the stone path, supported by a cane and a younger aide, was Harold Rosen, Grandpa's oldest attorney. The man everyone assumed was long retired or dead. Hello, Charles, Harold said evenly to my father, nodding toward the crowd. And everyone else. I believe this is the part where we make a few things clear. My mother sat down abruptly, probably to stop herself from fainting. Harold addressed the guests like it was a courtroom. For those unaware, the late Mr. Walter Jennings, this young woman's grandfather, left a very specific clause in his estate. It stated that should his daughter's family ever attempt to manipulate or extort his granddaughter financially, all family shares and trusts would revert to her name in full. He looked directly at my father. You signed that clause the day you buried it. We have the documents, the witness statements, the voice memos. Harold turned to me and smiled. It's been a long journey, hasn't it, Miss Jennings? I nodded once. Longer than it should have been. A murmur swept through the guests. A few had the decency to look ashamed. Most didn't. They were calculating, scanning the scene like they could still pivot, still salvage their connection to me now that I held the strings. But I didn't come here for their approval. I came to cut the strings. Effective immediately, Harold continued, Charles Jennings is removed from all boards, accounts, and inheritance channels. Furthermore, any funds borrowed in the name of the Jennings estate will be audited. Should embezzlement be confirmed, legal charges will follow. The air left the patio like a vacuum had turned on. My father slowly stood. You'll regret this. I didn't blink. I already regret not doing it sooner. Then I looked around at the same family who once made me feel small. The same people who told me I was too emotional, too quiet, too much of a burden to be taken seriously. I was never the disgrace, I said softly. You just hoped I'd believe I was. The guests didn't clap. They didn't cheer. They just watched because deep down they all knew they had picked the wrong side. Harold gave a respectful nod and stepped aside. The security detail escorted my father and brother out, their shouts growing fainter as the gate closed behind them. It was poetic, really. The same people who used to silence my voice were now speechless themselves. I turned to the caterer, who looked like he didn't know whether to keep serving canapés or evacuate. I gave him a calm smile. Keep the food going. We paid in full. He gave a relieved nod and disappeared back inside. Then I looked at the crowd and said, without a trace of irony, let's eat. After all, it is still a wedding. That stunned them. And then, slowly, awkwardly, some complied. Not out of celebration, but survival. My uncle, who once told me I'd never make a real executive, poured himself a drink like nothing had happened. My cousin Jade, the one who vanished after borrowing my tuition money, suddenly remembered how to smile at me. I didn't smile back. Because this wasn't revenge. Not really. It was liberation. I walked away from the chaos, my bare feet silent on the tile, my soaked dress clinging to my legs. I passed the floral arch where my brother had said his vows, where they toasted a future funded by me, one they would now never see. Behind the arch, tucked into the shadows of the garden, I saw a familiar face.
Levi.
The only cousin who never laughed at me. The only one who called me after Grandpa died and asked how I was doing, not what I inherited. He hadn't said a word the whole ceremony, and now he stood there, arms crossed, just watching me. Hey, I said softly. Hey, he replied, and for a moment, the tension cracked. You okay? He asked. I exhaled. I think so. He nodded slowly, then looked past me, toward the main tent. You know they're all going to change their tune now, right? Let them, I said. They can change all they want. Doesn't mean I'm opening the door again. There was a pause. Then Levi said, You know Grandpa always wanted you to be the one. I smiled faintly. Yeah, I just didn't think he'd make me earn it like this. We sat under the trees, away from the crowd, as the music awkwardly resumed. Somewhere, someone started dancing, probably a clueless guest trying to salvage the night. The lights flickered across the garden illuminating my soaked figure like some fallen myth they never thought would rise again. I used to dream of moments like this, I admitted. Not for the power. Just for the clarity. Knowing I wasn't crazy for thinking they treated me like an outsider. You weren't crazy, Levi said. They did. And now they have to face it. I nodded slowly. And then my phone buzzed again. It was a message from the private banker. Transfer complete. All accounts secured under your name. No further access granted to Charles or Nathan Jennings. I locked the screen. A strange stillness settled in my chest.
Not joy.
Not satisfaction. Just closure. Levi stood up and held out a hand. Come on. Let's finish what they started. I raised an eyebrow. What? He grinned. Let's throw the bouquet. But do it your way. So I walked with him back into the tent, not as the disgraced sister they thought they could laugh at, but as the woman who turned their whole empire to dust with a single phone call. The music paused, and every eye turned to me. I raised the bouquet, and I threw it high right into the pool, because sometimes you don't pass down broken traditions. Sometimes you drown them. They watched the bouquet float. Some gasped. Some laughed nervously. Most just stood there, unsure whether to clap, cry, or call their financial advisors. I didn't care anymore. Because the moment that bouquet hit the water, something in me snapped loose. The part that used to seek their validation, the part that flinched at their disapproval, it was gone. I wasn't just soaked in pool water. I was soaked in freedom. As I stood under the soft lights of the tent, Levi raised a glass and said, "To rewriting the script." Only a handful of people toasted back, but those were the only ones that mattered. I spent the rest of the evening not mingling with the guests but having quiet, genuine conversations. A few of my old professors had come. They pulled me aside and said they'd followed my career, always believed in me. They didn't care about headlines or family names. They saw me. I also saw the event manager pacing in the corner. I walked over to her. "You okay?" I asked. She hesitated. "I'm sorry. I didn't know they planned to ambush you like that." I smiled gently. "Don't apologize. You did your job, and I'll still pay your full rate." Her eyes filled. "Thank you." That night, I stayed in the master suite of the estate, the one they had planned to give to the newlyweds. My name was now on the deed. I didn't revel in it. I didn't throw a party. I just stood on the balcony, barefoot, in a fresh robe, sipping tea while the wind moved through the tall oaks. I opened Grandpa's old journal, the one Harold had delivered with the official documents. Inside, on the very first page, was a message in his familiar, slanted script. For the day they call you selfish and you finally realize you never were. I closed the book and let the tears fall. Quiet. Cleansing. Not because I was sad, but because someone had seen me long before I saw myself. The days that followed moved fast. Articles hit the financial news cycle. Jennings' legacy firm appoints youngest female CEO in company history. My inbox flooded. TV interviews, speaking offers, podcast invitations. But I declined most of them. Because the real work wasn't about the spotlight. It was about rebuilding the company with ethics, with purpose, with dignity. I reinstated the women's mentorship program my father had quietly shut down 5 years ago. I reached out to every employee he had overlooked or underpaid. I brought back the heart that had once defined our family name before greed and ego corrupted it. And I didn't do it with vengeance in my heart. I did it with clarity. As for my parents, they tried reaching out. First through lawyers, then through long-winded letters filled with half apologies and desperate rewrites of history. My mother even showed up once, standing outside the company building with a bouquet of lilies and a teary face. I walked past her.
Calmly.
Because forgiveness is a gift I reserve for those who earn it. And they hadn't even started. My brother? Last I heard, he'd moved back in with our aunt in Bakersfield. The startup investors sued him for misrepresentation. His wife left him 2 months later, citing emotional immaturity and financial instability in the divorce papers. I didn't laugh. I didn't celebrate. I just moved forward. Because healing isn't loud. It's silent, intentional, and deeply personal. A year later, I stood on the same estate grounds, this time in a navy blue suit and flats, watching a new couple say their vows. Employees of the company I now led. Two incredible people who'd met during a community project we'd funded. They invited me because they said I believed in love when the world didn't. And as the sun set behind them, painting the sky in soft pinks and golds, I realized something. I never needed their approval, their cheers, their validation. All I ever needed was the courage to stop explaining myself, and the strength to let their silence speak louder than my surrender ever had.